everyone. Happy to welcome you to this new session of Ask Anything. If you haven't joined the first session last week, let me just briefly tell you what this is about. Ask Us Anything is a live event format whose main purpose is to help you make the most out of ProtoPie and give you the opportunity to get answers to your questions live from a ProtoPie expert. So today we'll be diving into one of our hottest feature, conditions, and we have a special guest, Jeff Clarke, to guide you through this feature. So Jeffrey, or as we like to call him at ProtoPie, Jeff the Mad Scientist, he's one of our enterprise trainers. So yeah, Jeff knows the ins and outs of ProtoPie very well, and I'm positive his presentation will be great, and we'll clear up any doubts you perhaps still have about conditions in ProtoPie. So Jeff will start by explaining what conditions are and how they work in ProtoPie with some real examples he prepared. And after his presentation, you'll get a chance to ask questions in the Q&A window and have them answered live. Okay, so I'm going to stop here and let Jeff get started with his presentation. Okay.
Great. Good morning, everybody, or afternoon, or wherever you happen to be in the world. It is morning for me. Patricia, I don't have access to share.
Oh, you cannot. Oh, yeah. Sorry. Just let me just. Okay. Host, you should be able to.
Yeah, it should be possible now. Go ahead.
Be able to. Yeah.
Oh, yep. Sure. There we go.
Okay. Cool. Thank you.
Okay, you guys are seeing my screen?
Yes, we can.
All right. So let's start this slideshow. Here we go. So I'm going to talk today all about conditions in ProtoPie, and I'm going to start right from the beginning. So I'm going to answer the question of what it is in ProtoPie, why we might use it, and then I'll take you through some examples. And you'll even have the opportunity to follow along. So if you don't have ProtoPie started up, get it going, and then I'll share the link when we're ready to go. What is a condition in ProtoPie? At its very core, it instructs ProtoPie to make a decision, or a better way of putting it is you use it to instruct ProtoPie to make a decision. And one of several actions can be taken based on the current conditions of your prototype, hence the name condition. And the most important part to remember is the decision happens in real time in response to interaction. So if you need to make a decision when somebody clicks a button, that decision, or you use a condition at that moment when they click that button. So let's say they click the button the first time, and that first one, you should show some kind of a modal, and they click that button a second time, maybe that closes the modal, for example, right? You make that decision at the point of interaction. You can think of it in this if this then that format. And in ProtoPie parlance, that is the condition is the this and the that is the response. So here's an example. I have this toggle button. It's got two states. It's got this unselected state, black text on white, and it's got this selected state, white text on blue. And every time I click it, it toggles between these two states. So how would we do this inside ProtoPie? So let's say I click this button and I need to make a decision. What state do I change the button to? Now, intuitively think, well, it's unselected. I want to change it to the selected state. But you need to organize it such that you're asking the same question and you're going through the same set of conditions every single time. So I have my first condition. If the button is unselected, then I'm going to change the button to the selected state. And I have a second condition. If the button is selected, I'm going to change it into the unselected state. And here we can see this familiar if this, then that format. So if this first condition, then we do this. If we do this one, then we do this. Or in ProtoPie parlance, if this condition is met, we will take this response. Or if this condition is met, we will take this response. Now, in our particular situation, only one of these conditions can be true at any one time. So we take a look at it and we notice that this first one is true Therefore, we're going to take this action. And then, so my button changes. So now what happens when I click it again? Well, I'm going to go through the exact same set of decision points. So if the button is unselected, then change it to the selected state. If the button is selected, then change the button to the unselected state. And once again, we're going to take a look at these two conditions. And now the second condition is true and the first one is false. So we're going to take this course of action. And then our button changes back to its white state. So that in a nutshell is how a condition works. So how does this look in ProtoPie? You might see this grid all over the place, and this is our grid of triggers and responses. Now, a condition is neither of those two, and it kind of sits right here in the middle. And it's not a trigger and it's not a response, but it's like a gatekeeper for which set of responses get run as a result of a situation. And you'll find it right here at the bottom of all of your conditions. So when you make a trigger and you want to add a condition, you click the plus button to add a response, and you'll find it right here down at the bottom. So, okay, so this is what it looks like inside here. So I have this tap trigger, and I've got two conditions. If this condition is true, then I'm going to execute these two responses. If this condition is true, then I'm going to execute these two responses. All right, but here's the big question. How is ProtoPie actually making this decision? How does ProtoPie know? And here's where I'm going to show you. Now we're going to jump into the demo. So let's flip over to ProtoPie. Patricia's going to share the link. If you want to follow along, you can download this pie right here. Just go to the share button, click on download. And once it's downloaded, you can just click it once and you'll open it right up here in ProtoPie. I'll give you a minute or so to get caught up. Okay, so we're going to start with the exact same example that I just walked you through. We have this button. It is currently a white button with black text, and I want this to be a toggle button. Every time I click it, if it's white, it turns blue, and if it's blue, it turns back to white again. I want this to go back and forth. And I want this to happen when I click or tap the button. So this will be on a tap trigger. Add trigger, tap. And here's where I want to make my decision. So I'm going to add a condition. And here's where you pray and you make some magic and you say, ProtoPie, just figure it out for you. No, that's not true. You want to use something inside your scene as an indicator as to what you're going to make your condition on. And there's a number of things we can use here. We can use the background color of the button. We can use the text color. I'm going to use the background color. And when the background color is white, that is my signal that the button is in the unselected state, and therefore I want to change it to the selected state. So in my condition, I'm going to choose the matte shape here. You'll notice in my button is made up of a label, a text label, and this background shape that I've called matte. So when the matte's fill color, and you choose the property right here, and if it equals, and I can just pick white as my color here. If it equals white, then this is my signal that it's in the unselected state. And I'm going to rename this condition. Unselected, therefore I want to change it to blue. So I'm going to change the color of the matte, and we'll change it to some blue color here. This is not quite the right color. Let's pick something over here. And I want to change the text color as well. So I'm going to use a text response. And actually, I'm going to use a color response for that. Sorry, color response. And this will be on the text layer. And I can change the text color. We'll change it to white. If I just preview this right now, this should work for my very first click because my first condition is true. The background color is white, so my button should turn blue. And there we go. It did exactly that. But if I click it again, my button is not white, therefore there's nothing for it to do. So I need to have it do a second condition here. I'm going to add another condition. And we checked if the background color was white. And I could check if it's blue, this blue color. But let's say, I might want to change this blue to something else later. I'm actually just going to use the same condition, but I'm going to say if it's not white. So anything other than white, I will interpret this to mean that it's in the selected state. So I'm going to say if the matte color, if its fill color is not, that's what this this last icon means, is not equal to, and I'll choose white again. If it's not white, I'll interpret this to be it's selected. And I can just reset things. So let's say we want to reset the mat and reset the text. I could do it that way, or I could use 2 color responses. But now when I click this, I should have my button transitioning between blue and white, blue and white. Something that's very important to understand about the way conditions work, you'll notice that I can add responses up here above all of my conditions. And if I do that, let's say I wanted to add a little bit of feedback here, and I want the button to scale down and then scale back up in response to me clicking it. If I add any responses above all of my conditions, they will always run regardless of which condition is true. So this scale will run, and if this condition is true, then these responses will run. Or if this condition is true, then these responses will run. But this one will always run atop up here. I'm going to scale the button by a factor of 90 over the course of 0.1 seconds. And I'm going to change the easing here to ease in and scale it again back up to 100. And I'm going to delay it so it happens after the first one here. And I'm going to change the easing to ease out. And now, if everything worked right, and I know the eagle-eyed amongst you, I know that this is not going to work right, and we're going to fix it in a second. But if everything worked right, I should see my button scale down and scale up, and it change color accordingly with every click. So here we go. If I click this once, there we go. We saw that the button scaled, and it changed color. And if I click it again, oh, it actually is working correctly, isn't it? Now, I wouldn't have expected this. I would have expected my scales to not work, but actually it's because I used resets over here and I expected this wasn't going to work, but the resets are on different layers than the scales. So sorry for being a bit confusing here, but in any case, you'll notice that the scales worked every single time. And depending on which condition was true, either these conditions ran or these conditions ran. There we go. Any questions on that before I move on to the second example? Or do we want to, are we going to take questions now or do them at the end?
No, there will be a QA session after your presentation.
Okay, good enough. I'm going to move on to the second example. If we go to scene 2, that's this form one. And in this case, I have 2 fields. And when I hit the submit button, I will move on to this third scene called success. But I only want to move on if both of these fields have been filled out. So if both email and password have been filled out, I'm going to allow submit. If not, then instead I want to show this error message. And if we take a look at this, this field over here, we're going to see we've got this error message and I want it to show. Again, this will happen on the tapping of the submit button. So I'm going to add a tap trigger to submit and I'm going to make another condition. I want to make a decision. And my condition will be if the text property of the email field is not empty and the text property of the password field is not empty. ProtoPie allows us to do this by having multiple, I'll call this tests, or to be confusing, multiple conditions within your condition. And so I'm going to take the first one here. If the email's text property is not equal to nothing, and I'm just going to leave the value box blank. And notice there's this plus under here. I want to add another test inside my condition. So I'm going to hit plus. And I'm going to say if the password's text property is not nothing, then I'm going to allow it to jump over to this success scene. So I'm going to say jump, go to scene success, and I will use this, this pop transition. So let's preview this. If I click this submit button, I expect absolutely nothing to happen because neither of these fields have any text in them. So I click them and nothing happens. That's what I expect. If I put some text in email and click submit, nothing happens. And that's what I expect because the password field hasn't been filled. And if I only put something in the password field and I click submit, again, nothing happens. Something is only going to happen at this point when I have something in both fields. And there we go. That's working. So now how do I set this up to instead show an error message? I'm going to use a second condition, as you guessed it, condition. And if the email's text field equals nothing, not equal to, but equals nothing. If it equals nothing, then I'm going to want to show this error message. So I'm going to change the opacity on the error message, and I'm going to change it up to 100. Now, you might be thinking, can I add the second one? Can I do this? Can I say password text equals nothing? And the answer to this is no. And if I preview this and I put something in neither of these fields and I click submit. Now, the first one, in this case, we saw the error message. This worked. But if I put something in the first field here, let me reset it so that way we can hide the, if I put something in the first field and I click submit, I didn't get my error message. And similarly, if I put something in just the password field, I didn't get my error message. You can't do this or this when you're doing things this way. Whenever you set up multiple tests in your condition, they all have to be true for the response underneath to fire. So the email field has to be empty and the password field has to be empty for this error message to show. And that's why it worked the first time. When I click submit, the error message showed. But in my second one, my email field is not empty, but the password field is. And I don't have a condition that says if the password field is not empty, or sorry, if the email field is not empty, but the password field is, show this message. I don't have this concept of run these responses if this or this is true. It only works if this response will run if this and this is true. So the way we get around this is we set this up for just the email field. I'm going to remove this second test in here. And in my email field, if my email field is empty, then I'm going to show this error message. And then I'm going to make a second condition for the password field. And I can duplicate this. So Command D or Control D on Windows. When you duplicate a condition, it will duplicate the condition and any responses that are under it. And I'm going to change this to say if the passwords text field is empty. So I have my first condition. If both fields are not empty, then I'm going to jump. If the email field is empty, I'm going to show the error message. If the password field is empty, I'm going to show the error message. And I have the same one twice. And this won't work against us because this now accounts for if the email field is filled, but the password is empty, then this condition will run. If the email field is empty, the password field is filled, then this condition will run. And if both of these are empty, then both of these conditions are true and both of these will run. But they are both running the same response. And if you know the way ProtoPie works, if you have the same response on the same object at the same time, the second one takes precedence. Oops, I didn't want to do that. Let me put that back where it was. The second one takes precedence and we'll just have this opacity running. So these two conditions work for 3 different scenarios. Both are empty or one or the other is only filled with the other being empty. So I'm going to put in something in my email field. And I'm going to tap submit and I got the error. Let's say I want to go back and fix this. Now I want to go back and fix this. And if I just click submit, you're going to see my error message is still there and I'm not getting any new feedback that I still need to fix something. So let's add in a little bit of extra here. So when either of these fields gain focus, if I go back to fix it, let's hide the error message again. So that way it's ready to be shown again if there's still a problem. So I'm going to add a focus trigger on the email and on focus in, and I'm just going to change the opacity of the error message to 0, and I'll duplicate this and do the same thing for the password field. So now, if I put something in the email field, oops, this should be on the error message, not on the email field. Sorry about that, guys. There we go. So now if I put something in this field and I click submit, I get the error message. Now, if I go back to fix this, my error message goes away. And if I don't fix it properly and I hit submit, my error message comes back. So it gives me a little bit more feedback that I still need to fix something. And you can see now, if I fill out both of these and I hit submit, everything goes over there. Let's add just one more little bit of panache here. I would like this submit button to shake back and forth. The Apple experience that's shaking your head to say, no, you did something wrong. So I'm going to add a move response under this condition here. And I'm going to move the submit button. I'm going to move it by minus 10 pixels X, and I'm going to have this over 0.1 seconds. And let's duplicate this and let's move it by 20 pixels to the right. Duplicate it again, and let's do this by negative 20 pixels. Duplicate it again. Move it by positive 20 pixels, and then finally move it back to the center. So this should go left, right, left, and then back to the center very quickly. There we go. Well, that didn't work now, did it? So what I use move to. This should be a move by. So I'm going to change all of these and change it to move by. And there we go. That should fix my issue right here. There we go. So I'm getting it shake back and forth. And I want this to happen for the second condition as well. So copy all these, Command C, paste them right here. So now if I don't fill out any fields, I get this shaking and I get the error message. And if I go out and fill out the email field, and let's fill this out with a real email, we're going to say Jeff at ProtoPie.io. And I just hit submit. It's telling me there's still a problem. And let's say I'm going to put in my password, my super secure password of password1 star. Type submit, and it's going to allow me to go on to the next one. So this shows you how to have a complex condition. When you need multiple things to be true before you can do anything, you can add extra tests in here. And you can have as many as you like. You can have 3, 4, 10, as many as you like in here, so that way you can make a complex decision. And now let's move on to the last example. In this case, I've got this video that's playing, and I got this video from Pexels. It's a free video. It's just a 10 or 30-second clip, and it's just going to play looping here of this slow motion juggling, which it's very therapeutic, and I can sit here and watch this all day. What I'd like to be able to do is every time I tap the video, I want to toggle its playback state. If I click it once, I want it to pause, and if I click it again, I want it to resume. The problem we have here is ProtoPie doesn't give us. So I'm going to add a tap trigger on the video container layer here. And I want to make a decision. And I want to make a decision based on a property of the video. But you'll notice there's no playing state as a property. I don't have a property here that tells me that the video is actually playing. I can see that it's playing, but ProtoPie doesn't give us the ability to make a decision on whether or not it's playing because it doesn't actually give us the property of the video playing. So what do we do in this scenario? Well, how I normally handle this is I use a variable, and this is going to scare a few people, but trust me, this is going to be very simple. I use a variable, and this will have a value of 1 or 0. 1 represents when the video is playing, 0 represents when it is not. So let's call this variable. I'm going to call this is video playing. And since my video starts playing by default, it's just playing by default, I'm going to default this variable to 1, 1 meaning that it is playing. And now I can use the value of this variable to make my decision. So my condition, instead of it being on the video itself, I'm going to make it on this variable. If is video playing, if its value is 1, basically that means playing, then I'm going to pause the video. So let's do a playback response video, and we're going to pause. And let me duplicate this. If the value of playing is 0, then I'm going to resume the video. Play, and I want the play looping. So let's see what happens right now. Tap once, video paused. Tap again. Video does not resume. And why is that? Well, I have this variable called is video playing, and its value is 1. Nothing is happening here to change it to 0 when I stop the video. I need to manually change this. This is not an automatic thing. So under my condition of playing, and let's change this one to not playing so we can tell the difference. Under my condition is playing, when I pause the video, I also need to change the value of this variable to reflect the playback state here. So I'm going to add an assign trigger, response, to the is video playing, and I'm going to manually set it to 0. Assign is video playing, set it to 0. And similarly, when I resume playing under this condition, then I want to set it back to 1. Copy it here. I'm going to paste it here, modify this to say 1. Now, renaming your responses is a really good habit to get into. So you don't end up in a situation where if I hadn't renamed everything, this would say tap, condition, assign, playback, condition, playback, assign. I would not have, at a glance, I would not be able to know what's going on. And in this case, I'm actually going to change this to say pause video. And this one, I'm going to say resume video. So at a glance, I know that I'm tapping something, and let's say tap video container. When I tap the video container, I'm asking, is it playing? If so, pause the video and change the value of my variable. If it's not playing, resume the video, change the value of my variable. Now this should work. Click once, video pauses. Click once again, video resumes. Pause, play, pause, play. Now this is great, and I can use this variable now for other things. Because I've got this variable playing in lockstep with, or this variable changes in lockstep with the playback state of this video, I can use this video is playing variable as a trigger for something else. So let's say I use a detect on this is video playing, and once again, I can copy my conditions here, but I'm not going to because I'm not going to be doing the same thing, but I'm going to say condition. If the value of is video playing equals 1, so it's playing. And I'll add another condition in here for when it's not playing. Is video playing equals 0. I want to do something. Now you might have noticed I have this, this group over here called pause icon. And if I change its opacity, we can see it here, right? When I pause the video, I want to show that icon, and when I resume it, I want to hide it again. So let's add a opacity response under not playing. And I'm going to change the opacity of the pause icon to 100. And underneath the playing one, I want to set it to 0. Pause icon, set it to 0. Now, whenever I pause the video, that pause icon shows, and if I play it again, it resumes. And you can see I'm using the same set of conditions in here that I did up here, but I'm taking different courses of action. Now, there's nothing stopping me. I could have put this opacity. I could have put them up here. I didn't have to do it this way. It was just a way of demonstrating to say that now that I've used this variable to reflect the playback state, I can use this as a primary flag for other things that I might want to do. I might want to take other actions that happen when my playback state changes, and I don't want to have this one giant list of triggers and responses. So this just gives you a way of kind of organizing things if you want to do it this way. And that is everything that I have to show you about conditions today. The finished version of this pie is available too if you want to see it, and Rebecca can share the link for that as well. And it has everything in here. So we'll see it has our button example here that I can click and it does its thing. If we go to scene 1, you're going to see that if I just click submit, I need to put something in both fields for it to go on to the second or the third scene, And we have this example here where I can pause and play back the video. So if you want to download it and deconstruct it, see exactly what I did, maybe I went a bit too fast for you, everything here is in the finished version of the pie. There we go. I'd like now to open up the floor to everybody to ask questions.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff, for this super insightful walkthrough. Yeah, so it's now Q&A time. Please ask your questions using the Q&A window, which you'll find at the bottom of the interface. It looks like we have some questions already. So Max asks how to create tracking AR objects via camera. Okay, I think I'm gonna let you take this one.
You want me to take this one?
Yeah,
Yeah, you can't. That's not something that's not something that ProtoPie does just yet. The camera response allows you to access the camera and show its picture, but it doesn't have any ability to do tracking things. You can fake it by layering some graphics over top, but you won't be able to say, show a picture of somebody moving around and they've got devil horns that move around with them. You would have to fake that with real video and that kind of thing to fake the example. You can't do real AR tracking yet. Would love to see that happen though. That would be amazing.
Yep. Fredo, you wanted to add something perhaps?
Oh, no, nothing.
No, okay. Yep. Okay, so let's move to the next question. How can I add specific parameters to the conditions like email has to contain an ad, password needs to be 6 characters long, and password has to contain symbols and numbers. Ooh,
So
I
that is
remember you made
that is possible.
very good example.
Give me 1 second. I can actually show you an example of that working. That is very advanced though, and it is possible with ProtoPie. I just need to find it. Where's my, here it is. Okay, I'm going to share my screen again.
Yep.
Okay, so we're seeing my screen here, and this does exactly what you're looking for. This means, so I'm just going to start typing in here, and if I just put in here, it's going to, password must be between 8 and 16 characters in length. So, okay, you're noticing the password is not masked here, and I have it shown so you can see what I'm typing, but normally this would be a masked password. But anyway, Jeffrey Clarke, that's more than 8 characters, right? Oh, it needs to have at least 1 uppercase. Well, okay, well, let's change this to, well, it must contain at least 1 number. All right, very needy. Oh, now it needs to have a special character. Well, okay, well, let's add an @ symbol in there. And now it's passed. How did I do this? Here, let me download this. And I'll open this up in ProtoPie. I've made this as a component that I can send a message to. So whenever the value of this field changes, I'm sending a message over to this component over here that I can configure. So we have this component, it's called Ultimate Validator, and it has a bunch of overrides set over here where I can say minimum password length must be 8 characters, maximum must be 16, minimum uppercase needs to be 1. I could change this to 2 if I wanted. Minimum lowercase needs to be 1, minimum numeric needs to be 1, special characters, yada, yada, yada. So this is how it is configured. And then inside the component itself, so if we go in here, and this is going to look scary. There's a lot going on here. It receives a message called validate, and I assign this to a value called password. And then I do a bunch of things. I'm going to reset a bunch of counters right here because I need to count how many uppercase there are, how many lowercase there are, how many numerics there are. So I have a bunch of variables down here that count the number of variables. And I do a couple of decisions here. So this condition, if it's too short, then I'm sending back a result that says it's failed with an error code 1 and a description that says password must be between, and then this has the password length. So, and similarly for too long, I send that back as well. And if the length is okay, I need to do something that's a bit more complex. So I can't do everything here. So instead, I send a message off that gets received within the component over here that classifies the characters. And this goes through the characters 1 by 1. And I'm not going to go into too much detail about how I did this, but essentially, this whole set of conditions gets repeated for every single character that's in the password here. And if the current character is an uppercase character, then I add 1 to the count of the uppercase. If the character is lowercase, then I add 1 to the lowercase count. If it's a numeric, then I add 1 to the count of numerics. If it's a special character, I add 1 to the count of special character. And if it's a bad character, and this is characters that are not allowed, then I'm going to add 1 to that. Once I've gone through every single character, then I'm going to call this calculate result. And what this is going to do is this is now going to do a comparison of the number of bad characters, for example, against the number of allowed bad characters. So if the number of bad characters is greater than 0, I'm sending a validation result of it's failed, and I'm going to give it the error code 6, and this one, it can't have any of these bad characters. If it doesn't have enough special characters, then again, sending back another validation result. If it doesn't have enough numerics, if it doesn't have enough lowercase, if it doesn't have enough uppercase. And then if all of those meet the conditions. So if the count of uppercase is at least the number of minimum uppercase that I need, and the count of lowercase is at least as much as the amount of lowercase that I need, count of numerics, count of special characters, and the count of bad characters is 0, like there are no bad characters, all of these are true, then my password is okay. And I send the result back passed, error code 0, that means it's passed. So this is complicated, and I could do an entire tutorial on everything that I did here to build it. But I can share this link so that way you can deconstruct what's going on. And if you want to attack it, you can. Otherwise, you can just use this component. You don't really have to know what's going on, and you can just configure the components as you need it. So if you need, let's say it has to have at least 5 uppercase letters, I can just configure it. I don't really have to know what's going on, but I can configure it. And if I preview this, and you're going to see if I put in, I put in enough characters in here and I hit the enter key, must be between 8 and 16. So it's too long. Let's remove a bunch. Must contain at least 5 uppercase characters. So there we go. Now I've got 5 in there, and it must contain at least 1 number. So let's add a number, and needs to have at least 1 of these special characters. So this is something you can reuse over and over and over again. And it doesn't have to be just for password either. You could do this on a text field. Let's say you've got specific requirements that you need on a text field. It needs to be at least a certain length. Then you could do it that way too. So let's say I only cared about length, that it had to be a minimum, right? I could just put a ridiculously high number in here. Let's say 999. Doesn't require, no requirements for minimum or maximum uppercase or lowercase, no requirements for numeric, no requirements for special characters, and there's no bad characters, and I can just remove this. And now I can just put something in here, and when I hit enter, it just needs to be at least 999. If I don't like this error message, then I also have the error code coming back. And instead of showing the error message, I can have a custom one based on the error code that comes back. So, and then if I put in enough characters in here, then it's going to say passed. That is a long-winded answer to a very specific question that I'm sure a lot of you are going to use.
Thank you. Thank you for the example. Okay. Okay, a good one. So someone asked, Jeff, do you have any coding background? Can you be skilled in using ProtoPie without previous coding knowledge?
Well, that's a loaded question now, isn't it? The answer is yes, I do have coding background. Now, I was never a programmer per se, and anyone who is a seasoned programming and engineer would laugh at my coding skills. I know enough just to make me dangerous. I started getting involved in web design back in like the 90s, and we do simple scripty things like image rollovers and that kind of thing. But if you know just a little bit of coding, it goes a long way in helping you organize your thoughts when you are building things in ProtoPie. Now, as UX designers, we don't always have a coding background, but we do kind of think of things the same way. A UX designer will often put together a journey flowchart that shows, the bunch of decisions that you go through in making a decision. I think I saw on in LinkedIn the other day, somebody from Slack shared the flowchart for deciding how a notification gets sent. And it's a very complex decision tree, but that's the same kind of thinking that you go through when you're putting together, when you're deciding how you want to react to a certain situation. You need to go through the same decision tree. If this, then that. If not this, then do something else. And if you need to kind of branch off in a bunch of different ways, then you can use techniques of, like I did in the password generator. So here, let me share again so you can see what I mean here. So if I go back into the component here, I receive the message and I make a couple of decisions here. Too short, too long, yeah. Otherwise, I have more decisions to make, but that would make this very complicated to put everything in here. So I branch off and I use send and receive. And this is a technique I use a lot. I use a send to send a message to itself to receive this. And then I make all of these other decisions, outside the context of this. This is just a way to help me organize. So this is like a decision tree. Is it too short? If so, send back the message. Is it too long? Otherwise, send back the message. If it's not too short, not too long, the length is okay. I need to make more decisions. So I'm kind of doing a then go over here and make some more decisions. So this would be a branch off in my flowchart kind of thing. Does that answer your question?
Okay, amazing. Okay, great. Gregory asked, do you know if it's possible to use another unit that pixels to move or place content or object on the stage?
No, you need to use pixels for everything in ProtoPie. So the way that ProtoPie works, because you might be thinking you might want to create a responsive design, but when you're working in ProtoPie, you're working with a fixed screen size. So there is no real need to work with a unit like view width or view height or rems or ems or anything like that. However, you can do mathematical calculations. So if you want to work with a percentage, so let's say you want to do something in an abstract way, and you want to say, is this object positioned at the center of the screen? And even though I know that, I'm working with a width of 375, and I could just say, is it at 375 divided by 2? I could use a calculation to say, is the position of the object at 0.5 times 375, right? And that kind of gives me a ratio of the position. So kind of like working on a percentage. You can work in that way if you want to, but at the ultimate core of things, you're always working in pixels, if that answers your question.
Cool. Then we have another question. Is it possible to make Lottie trigger to be animated on scroll? Maybe it means animating LottieFiles on scroll.
So does that mean, so let's say I have a LottieFile animation that is currently not animating, and I have a scrolling box, and if I scroll that, say 100 pixels down, that triggers an animation? Is that the question? Yes. Yep. You can absolutely do that. Lotties can be controlled just like video can. So I can put a Lottie on my stage and configure it to not be animating by default. And then I can use a range trigger, for example, and I can set it to fire when the scroll is at least 100 pixels. Then I can fire off a playback response on the Lottie to start playing. So yeah, you can do that.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. And Konstantinos asked, would it be possible to have some advanced functions like this so that we can use right out of the box? Function as lowercase variable.
So if you there is no has lowercase function, but there are functions that make this fairly straightforward, but they're not quite English readable kind of thing. But I'll show you how I determine if something is lowercase. I'm going to share again, and we'll go back to we'll go back once again to my ultimate password validator. Here's how I determine if something is uppercase. So in my condition, ignore this part. This just determines which character I'm working with. Sorry, that's not my, it's this one up here. Okay. Oh, sorry, am I looking in the wrong place here? Yes, okay. Here's how I determine if something is lowercase. I take that character, and in this formula, I convert that character into lowercase. If they don't match, this character is not a lowercase character. If they do match, then it's lowercase. And uppercase is done the same way. Sorry, uppercase and lowercase, they're done the same way, right? Convert it to uppercase, and if they don't match, then it is lowercase. Why did I do it this way? Right, so, okay, so this accounts for numbers. So if the character converted to lowercase, if it doesn't match, that means it has to be uppercase. If you try to convert a number, uppercase to lowercase, it stays the same. If you try to convert a character, uppercase to lowercase, it stays the same. So if I can convert from lowercase to uppercase, then that means this must be an uppercase character. There are other ways to do this as well. I could have instead used the index of function. So let's say I have a, let's just say that this character, let's say this is a variable that represents my current character. And I can create a formula here. So there is a function called index of, and what this does is it tests a bit of text for the presence of another bit of text. So I'm going to say if A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z, all of the possible lowercase characters. If, and let's say I have a variable called character. If it does not equal -1, oops, sorry, can't type here, does not equal -1. And why am I using -1? Well, I'm going to tell you in a second right here. The way index of works is it looks inside this bit of text, and it looks to see if this bit of text exists in here. If it does, it will give me back a number representing the position in here. So let's say my character was the letter lowercase g. And here it is right here, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's the sixth one in here. It'll give me the number 6. If it doesn't exist, it'll give me -1, meaning that this character is not in here at all. So the character I'm looking at is not lowercase. It's something else, but it's not lowercase. So that's another way that you can test for is lowercase or not. So it's not exactly human readable. If you don't know what index of does, you might look at this and be incredibly confused by what's going on. But I highly encourage you to take a look at, if you go to ProtoPie's website and you go to learn, you go to documentation, and let me move this out of the way, and we go to formulas and functions. This is a reference of all of the functions available to ProtoPie, and in particular, we're interested in the text ones. You can read about all of the different functions that are available, and this shows you what they do and examples on how they work. So you can take a look, and there's a lot you can do with these functions to kind of go the long way to get around the fact that we don't have a is lowercase function or is uppercase function. I think that answers that question.
Patricia, you're muted.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Yeah, I was saying, unfortunately, we're running out of time, so we have time to answer one last question. Okay, so how are you able to communicate conditions across multiple components? Example, I have a carousel of cards of outfits you can shop, and when you tap on the card, it posts a tray model component where you can see and shop the items within the outfit. Question, how would I set up the prototype? So if the user taps the third outfit in the carousel, then the tray model component opens the third outfit instead of the first.
Yeah, so there are a number of ways to approach this. It's going to be a bit of a long-winded answer. You can do things like this, but it involves duplicating your work. So you're going to have all of your outfits, or at least the ones that you're going to respond to within your prototype. So let's say you've got a carousel of 20 items, 20 outfits in here, and you're going to make the first 3 clickable, right? You can make one modal that has the layout for your outfit details, and have the image and information for, say, the first 3 outfits in there. And then when you tap the cards, the components would send a message to the scene, that says show details, and then you can pass on a little bit of information along with that message. So you can say show details 1, and then the modal would receive that message and say, okay, well, if the outfit is 1, then I'm going to show the details for outfit 1. And if the value is 2 instead, then I'm going to show the details for outfit 2. What ProtoPie doesn't give you is a way to dynamically pull information from one component to the other. Just kind of doesn't work that way. And especially when you're working with images and such, right? Because you really can't just say pull an image and duplicate it over here. It doesn't really work that way. So it does involve you duplicating a little bit of your work, but you can do it in smart ways, so that way you won't have to duplicate every single thing. And when you're creating a prototype, right, you care about demonstrating the experience. You're not creating the real app. So you don't necessarily have to make all 20 of your items clickable. You can if you wanted to, but know that you're going to account for 20 items in your modal, right? You can do it that way if you need to. Let's say you want to do a super high fidelity testing session, and you really do want to test the real version of your app. You can do it that way, but you need to assess what you actually need to do versus what you want to do.
Okay. Okay, thanks so much. Okay, perhaps we have, first we have time for one last question. Do you have external tools to visualize or strategize on your logic decisions in your prototypes?
Yeah, I mean, you can literally just use a notepad, and I use here you can see it. Like I just literally scratch down ideas on here, and I just scratch it in English. So programmers use a term called pseudocode, and pseudocode is not real code, but it is literally you writing down the steps of how you want to make your decision and what factors you're using to make that decision. So yeah, you can certainly do it that way. Another way you can do it, and I mentioned this before, as UX designers, we often make flowcharts that show a user journey and all the decision points. That is an incredibly useful tool for visualizing how you're going to make your decisions, right? And you can make flowcharts, and I mean, if you're an old Windows guy, you might be using Visio. You can do stuff like that in Figma, or you can use there's a good one that I used to use that I haven't used in a long time. But in any case, you can make your flowchart in anything you want, or you can literally scribble it on a piece of paper. And it's just a way for you to kind of help organize your thoughts. What order am I trying to decide things? What happens when I branch off from one direction to another? And what knock-on effect does one decision have on future decisions, which is something you also need to consider as well. But literally, you could just write it down on a piece of paper, scratch it down. Cocktail napkin notes are more than adequate for doing something like this.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, yeah. Those who okay, we have now we have answered all the questions. Amazing. So yeah, if you have more questions, feel free to contact us through our support form, which you will find on our website. Okay, so let me just share my screen while it's time. So, okay, yeah. Okay, sorry. Yeah. So before wrapping up the session, I would like to share this discount code we created for you. It's a 30% discount code you can use on our website when subscribing to an early or monthly pro plan. Of course, if you have any questions or need help, you can contact our support team at support@protopie.io. We have some more cool events coming soon. There's a webinar on October 27th, prototyping the driver behind innovation, featuring designers from Flipkart and Pixart. And we'll have our next session of Ask Us Anything on November 3rd, which will be dedicated to components. Yeah, you can find the registration links for these events in the chat. And if you haven't yet, we encourage you to join our social media channels and user community to keep up to date with our latest news and connect with other fellow ProtoPie users. So yeah, it's now time to say goodbye. We hope you liked the session. You'll see a short survey after quitting. Please save 2 minutes for it. It will really help us improve the sessions. And yeah, thank you again for joining. We hope to see you again at our next live event. Goodbye, everyone.